Assalamu alaikum. We would like to welcome all of you to the Qatar Pavilion and the Solutions Day to visit this interesting panel with a diverse background that all tackles solutions in regards to the climate. We are pleased to have such expertise to share their experience in regards to their field. To begin with, we're going to have a presentation presented by Ms. Fennel Aouni from the Global Green Growth Institute, and after that we're going to have a presentation from Dr. Naoki Matuso from the Institute of Global Environmental Strategies in Japan, and later in 30 minutes Ms. Anura will be joining us to discuss her presentation as well. So I would like to give Ms. Fennel the floor to start her presentation.
Good morning, everyone. Okay, oh, great, marvelous. Okay, hello. Well, is it good morning? Actually, it's good afternoon, sorry. Thank you. Oh, I've got to work it myself. Okay, my name is Fenella Awan, and I head carbon pricing over at the Global Green Growth Institute, GGGI. We are headquartered in Korea, but we have offices in over 40 countries around the world where we help our members, we're a member organisation, help our members on a green growth pathway. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of an idea of what we do under carbon pricing, carbon trading. And Qatar is a member country of GGGI. And we are speaking to them about this, so I'll try and make it a little more relevant to Qatar. There we are. I'm going to come down here so I can see my own slide. Okay, so currently the objectives in GGGI's role is to try and help open up markets. We're not a buyer or seller ourselves per se, but we do help others to buy and sell in the markets. Just as a little refresher for those that are not aware, this is Article 6 of the Paris Agreement that says countries, between countries, can have cooperative approaches. That means that, say, one country exceeds its NDC ambitions and it carries on reducing emissions, then it effectively has some excess, it has some spare, and it's allowed to sell that to another country that is either not being able to meet its NDC or alternatively has made much more ambitious targets. So, for example, we're working with Sweden, who has a very tight net zero target. So they're trying to get to absolute zero. They will do as much of it as they can themselves, but there's a little gap that they can't fill with their own activities. And that is where they want to buy international carbon credits. I might wait for a moment for everyone to get comfy. Keep it sort of dodging forward one row. Comfy? Brilliant. Okay. To do this trading under Article 6 is not super simple, it's quite complex. So our job is to help the country put in the frameworks that's needed. What I mean by frameworks is, if we look at the blobs across the top, we help a country understand the market dynamics. So this is by raising awareness and then by capacity building. So this is one of those activities that I'm doing with you now, raising awareness of what Article 6 is about. Governance. So we help put in the policies and the procedures and the strategies that are needed. And I'll go on and speak a little bit more about that in our activities, but it could be a country deciding we are going to have an Article 6 strategy. We're going to publicly tell people what we are prepared to sell. And what that means is that then a project developer, someone who wants to build a renewable energy plant or a biogas plant, can have a look at a publicly available document and say, oh, great, so I might be able to get international carbon credits for this or not. If it's something that the country has said, no, we're going to do that ourselves as part of our own NDC. Then the technical assistance. Here, well, what we're really trying to do here is link with other organisations that are experts in the field. So, you know, we're going to hear from IGIS and their expertise on MRV. There are plenty of companies with expertise in registries. There is some standard training materials. So we link with those other organisations that have the expertise rather than try and repeat. Then importantly, we're trying in countries that want to sell, we're trying to identify projects and activities that could be eligible to get carbon credits. So that's what we call origination. So this is going out and saying, okay, is there a renewable energy plant planned to be built somewhere? Or is there something we can do around biogas or energy efficiency, waste management, anything that might reduce emissions above and beyond the country's NDC. And then finally, transactions. So here, this is quite a new area of our work. So what we're doing here is we're facilitating the purchase and the sale. So we're speaking to people both sides, and we're helping them to agree a contract for trade. And then on behalf of the buyers, we're doing fund management. So we're holding the credits as a trust fund manager. So you can see here where we're active. So we are in Morocco, Senegal, Zambia in Africa, then Pakistan, Nepal, Vietnam, Thailand, Cambodia, Indonesia, and Colombia. This list is always changing and expanding, and we will be adding 2 more countries, one in Asia and one in Africa, in the next month or so. And who are we working with? So we're working with the Swedish government via their allocated agency, the Swedish Energy Agency. We're dealing with the Norwegian government, and we're dealing with the German government via the International Climate Initiative, the ICI funds. So we're probably the largest deliverer of technical assistance related to Article 6 trading currently globally. So a little more detail about the transactions that we're doing. So the Swedish program aims to complete transactions that are more traditional in basis, shall we say. So it will look at things that were quite similar to what traded under the CDM. And there we are working in Cambodia and Nepal. I have before now made everyone do a guess the flag on this screen to see if you're paying attention on the last one, but I won't today. The key activities, what we're really trying to do is help the governments understand what international Article 6 trading is all about, to make sure that they're fully confident and fully happy about going forward with it. We're also designing the deal structuring. So in Nepal, we're looking at a series of biogas plants, which not only reduces emissions, but really importantly for the country, actually helps with sanitation, because there's a real problem with sanitation. And the aim is that they start taking a new feedstock of fecal sludge into the biogas plants that will then give the desired co-benefit. And in Cambodia, we're looking at a number of things, some water purification, cook stoves, and a number of other areas. We started in 2020. We're currently at the stage of completing technical work, and we should be looking at signing a bilateral agreement in Nepal in maybe about Q1 next year. The second programme, Designing Article 6 Policy Approaches, or DAPA, with the Norwegian government, is somewhat different because this is looking at policy approaches. What I mean by that is going to a country and saying, how about you change your policy on net metering? So allowing a industrial player to add renewable energy to their plant, whether it's a steelworks or whatever it is. And then when they don't require the energy, they can sell the excess into the grid. Also, they can then send it around the grid and send it very specifically to another plant and have which we call wheeling. And that is having a private market of buying and selling between independent power producers. So if you do that, then activities will happen, is the idea. And if those activities happen, can we measure how many of those activities happened because of the policy? This is really the key in our minds to scaling up, to trying to meet the 1.5 goal, to making a bigger difference, because project by project, as we saw in the CDM, it made a major change, but it wasn't enough. We need to do more. So we do believe it's never been done before. It's quite challenging, but we've been looking at it since 2019, and we're working in Indonesia, Morocco, Senegal, and Vietnam. And for example, in Morocco, we are looking at, as I described that slightly earlier, the wheeling policy. And that had historically been stuck in waiting for some technical assistance to help actually put that policy in place for about 6 years. So, you know, we're hoping it will be in within the next year, and that will be a major coup, I think, and we'll get a lot of reductions, a lot of private sector players wanting to act on that. And then our third programme at the moment we call, Supporting Preparedness for Article 6 Cooperation, or SPARC. Here we're working in Colombia, Pakistan, Thailand, and Zambia. We're saying here that, you know, the aim is to get private sector into NDC implementation and raising ambition. I mean, it's a lot more than that, and I have a further slide on this, but it's a very wide-ranging program. We're just starting it, but the aim is, again, that these countries want to sell their excess emission reductions to other countries such as Qatar or others. So we're trying to make sure that these guys, the potential sellers, are all set up and ready to be able to sell when countries come along and ask. And actually the interesting thing here is that the first two, the buyer is already identified as Sweden and Norway, but this third one, there is no buyer identified because Germany has said that for the moment they are not a buyer of Article 6 because they're within the EU. So these will be created, we will create ITMOs here that can be sold anywhere. Okay, so as I say, we're currently in 10 countries. We have local experts. So in all the countries where we are, we have a focal person. So our belief of capacity building is not just something like this where we come along and we announce and we do a session and it's an hour or 2 hours long. We also believe that capacity building has to be continuous. So our aim is to have people in the country that we're working, being able to have a coffee with the person from the government, be on the end of the telephone, be in the next door office to answer any of the questions. And that's really the only way we're going to embed knowledge, by doing that. And as we have in Qatar, we have our GGGI team based in Doha. And as said, we have over $30 million in funding for technical assistance, so are the largest deliverer of technical assistance focused on Article 6. And we have the proven ability to engage with the private sector. We have several examples, and I myself have come from the private sector before I joined GGGI. So we did a survey across countries that wanted to come into Article 6, and we said, you know, what are you missing? What do you want to be part of it? Do you want to trade? Or is it all, no, it's too complicated, I'm not interested? So we collected first-hand views, first global survey of this nature of market perceptions of the potential market. And this fed into the design of the carbon transaction platform, which I'll explain a little bit later. There we go. So we asked people, have you considered participating in Article 6? And 83% of countries said yes, which was pretty high, because they think it will help them meet NDC targets, it will help them raise ambition, bring finance into the country, and can build on previous incarnations of carbon markets and the voluntary market. The ones who were no were more around, there's a bit of uncertainty, there's not been a lot of discussion yet, so they're still very early stage. So then, has the government been approached by a potential buyer? And 70% of countries said, yep, someone's already spoken to us and said that they're interested in buying. Which at this early stage where we're still saying, oh, are people interested in Article 6? Do people know what Article 6 is quite revealing that people who want to trade are already approaching people. So there's a bit of a view of who it was. And then we were looking at who is actually engaged in doing some pilots, some early stage trades. And that was pretty much half-half. And then we were saying, what is it that you most need in order to help you get ready to trade? And it was financial assistance for technical infrastructure. So as we said, that the technical assistance from the first slide. They want to do projects so that they can do the learning by doing. And they want some general understanding of what markets are. And as I say, that will be continuous. So then we had, we asked, you know, participation in forums, discussions, knowledge exchange, things like that. Do you think you would benefit from it? 100% of people said, yes, we do think we benefit from it. And the top 3 country priority areas were regulation. They need to put regulation in place to engage in international markets. They want training for the government and other stakeholders, and they want to develop national rules and procedures. So this is the governance framework as we explained. So here we asked them, okay, so buyers and sellers, do you believe that there are equal opportunities between those that want to buy in the markets and those that want to sell in the markets? And this was quite revealing, actually, because what we found was that, okay, 14% were, that's fine, it's all okay, but nearly half of the survey respondents said there's not an equal table. The buyers dictate everything. The buyers say, here's the contract, sign it. And sellers are saying, I don't want that. I want to be able to design a trade together with the buyers. So we have a few points there. For example, the market disproportionately favors the buyer's needs. The buyer understands and knows more about the market than we do. And that gives us a disadvantage in a financial trade. It's too early to know, the rules aren't well defined, etc. So the conclusions that we came up with was the capacity building needs are significant, call for broader engagement in Article 6 activities, reaching more stakeholders. It should be integrated, Article 6, into NDC implementation. So when you're talking about your NDC implementation plans, think about how you might want to use Article 6, as well as national development agendas and long-term strategies. And then relevance of even access to information. This is information on pricing, market activity, all of that. So, right. So what we did was, in answer to that survey, we have created the Carbon Transaction Platform. And the idea of this is to address the major challenges in the Article 6 market development. So, specifically from the survey, the high participation burden, low confidence, need for knowledge exchange, and the uneven participation in the transaction design. So what it is it's a mechanism that will allow GGGI to expand its Article 6 support. It's aimed to provide an equal opportunity for the buyers and sellers. So we have 40 members, 45 members now, and the idea is for them to sit together at the table, not have the buyers say this is the way it should be, these are our criteria, but have the sellers as well to say, well, this is what we can sell, this is what we're interested in selling, now who would like to buy that? Then to facilitate the transactions, making sure that everybody is fully aware of the information, and then scaling up and expanding the knowledge exchange. It's a little bit tricky, this. There we go. So that's what it looks like. It has two pillars. This will, our aim is to reduce emissions. Outcome 1, improved help get ready. That's the capacity building, that's the technical assistance, the building of the governance frameworks, originating and matchmaking the trades and the knowledge sharing. So as soon as we do something, make sure that we share that knowledge. Don't just say, okay, we've done it, now let's do another one. We need to share the knowledge as well. The second side is the side where we will be running carbon trust funds. So we hope to bring all the buyers to the table and then have the sellers participate and be able to find activities that buyers want to buy and sellers want to sell. That's the most important. So through it, the primary objective is to increase the number of Article 6 transactions. This was approved by our board, our governance vehicle, which is our council, at the end of October, that we could proceed with establishing the carbon transaction platform. So we are now looking at the funding for it. So our current programs with Sweden and Norway and Germany will come under it, but we will look to add to those as well. Oh, and that's it. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions for Ms. Fennell?
Yes, hi. You need a microphone to say.
Okay, very good.
So I didn't start from the beginning, but so on that, please.
What would you like me to expand on?
And what are the necessary things?
Well, what it contains is teaching you what Article 6 is, but it's not a program in itself. The point of capacity building is to get people to the point of trading. So I think the capacity building has to be seen as part of the overall work. So you can't sort of, I think what we found is there's little point in just doing capacity building, because then people are educated, but what do they do with that? You know, the aim is to do a trade. And once we've worked out, is your country able to do a trade? In other words, what is its NDC aims? Able to create excess to be able to sell, or does it want to buy? And then once we know that there is a kind of, yes, it's going to be viable, then the capacity building comes as part of that. But what you have to do in a country is work out what's already there. How much do people know? Because it's difficult to simply go in and teach everybody the same thing when, in fact, everybody's got a different knowledge base. So the capacity building is an onward thing that comes with our programs. It's not a standalone activity that it's just, okay, go to this website and you can learn. Now, the UNDP has put out a training program recently on Article 6. So if you go to, I can't remember where it is, but if you contact the UNDP, I think that's a more general one. We tend to be more bespoke on the idea of the capacity building leads to transactions. But I think we will be publishing a lot of guidance and information that people can learn from over the next coming 3-4 years. Okay? Hopefully that helps. Yeah, sure. There's another question.
Thank you very much. What a very, very wonderful presentation. My name is I'm from Nigeria and the CEO of Sustainability Initiative. So when you were talking about and the role they could play in under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, I also was surprised that in Nigeria, you do not have a link in Nigeria, and for our population and everything, I think it's something that you have a link in Nigeria to be able to have a foothold. And ESI, that's Earth and Sustainability Initiative, my organization, my NGO, is quite willing to give you a foothold in Nigeria, while also at the same time looking at the having the gender sensitization in Article 6, because what has happened over the years is that when you come to such technical discussions, you find that the gender folk, the youths are not there, and it becomes an affair. Mostly the men, to all the males here. So activity is something that we should emphasize for the gender and for the youth, so that looking for in the next generation coming, it will be a balanced discussion. The women will not be fighting for inclusiveness at that point, will have been at the center of it. To have a more robust discussion with government when it comes to implementation of most of the sections under Article 6. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that comment. I mean, I'll come back on two things, Nigeria and our activities. As I said at the beginning, the GGGI is a member organization. Any country can join. The membership is open. They just have to send a letter from their government saying they'd like to become a member. We've not received that from Nigeria. So that has to be the first step. However, we have had indication that they would like to do that very recently. So I think we will be welcoming Nigeria to GGGI shortly. And once that's done, that's the foothold. Is the membership, first of all. And then your second point of gender, which is very important, absolutely crucial. Within the technical assistance part and within the setting up of the governance frameworks, you're also putting in place guidance and guardrails. That's where you add the gender. So you're saying, okay, we need to ensure that projects are developed in the following way. Now, there's two places you can put that restriction. You can put it in the seller country guidance for what they will approve as a project under Article 6, and you can put it in the buy side. So Sweden, a strong advocate for gender, is going to have very, very defined and very strong criteria on gender. The youth part, we're actually, and I had a question about this earlier with a couple of the gentlemen from Qatar. We are including under our Spark program, we have a community of practice for high ambition. And that community of practice is actually going to be engaging on a research basis with a number of universities within the implementation countries to link with international experts. And that will bring in the youth to Article 6. Yeah? Perfect. Any other questions? Sorry, you've been waiting a while, haven't you?
That's fine. I just have a question with specifically about not just Article 6, but more developments.
Yeah.
There are many markets currently being either through compliance-based markets or voluntary-based markets. Some people are opting for the Vera system, some people are opting for the Gold Star. How does this framework convince these states to go or find a line? No, go to Article 6, 6.4, or markets to go 6.4 as itmost. So how can that play a role? Especially some people, the CDM and the transition aspect are more based compliance markets.
Okay, big question, could have very long answer, but let me try and keep it short. Our role and the role of the carbon transaction platform is to open up markets, all markets. So we are looking to Article 6 because that requires the most government intervention, and we support governments. The voluntary market doesn't really need us, but the compliance, what we called historically the compliance market, the government-supported Article 6 needs our help. So that's why you've seen me talk about Article 6 and Article 6.2, 6.4. But there are also a lot of other aspects that add to this. So it could be a gold standard project that you apply a corresponding adjustment to. Now it's the compliance trade. Or it's a voluntary market and we help it go through. At the moment, buyers are saying that they're interested in voluntary, but we absolutely could have some of those. And then we say, okay, fine, it's a voluntary carbon trade, that, in other words, there's no corresponding adjustment, but maybe they want to register it. Maybe the country wants to set up a database to stop double claiming or fraudulent activity. So Latin America has a huge problem with fraud around carbon trading, and people trying to sell non-existent credits, or people trying to buy land from farmers, get them to sign over credits that don't exist. So it could be that a country says, okay, if I have a database, I'm reducing my risk. In the end, it all comes down to price, but it's a price we don't know yet. So we've kind of got to get up and running and do some trades. And then, if history serves us well, we would assume that a correspondingly adjusted transaction under 6.2 or 6.4 would probably reach the highest price. Then a non-correspondingly adjusted credit, but if it's registered, if it's shown in a database in the host country, so everyone and the government shows they're aware of the sale, then a voluntary market not shown in any database with no corresponding adjustment, and you go down and down and down. So, you know, I think it will end up being price, but at the moment we just have to kind of create everything and then see where the market settles. Yeah? Okay. Sorry, moving over to you.
Thank you for the... Just a small question. You mentioned in your presentation the transaction platform. Is it a national platform or under the GGGI context? If it's not national, we have, I mean, under the Article 6, we have the registry, and under the 6.4 international platform, and the and also we have the accounting and reporting platform, and the 6.8. What does this bring to the whole system as additional benefit?
Sure, and that's a very valid question. I will apologize for the name. It is the name. Don't think of it as a platform the way you're thinking of a platform. This is not trying to reinvent the UNFCCC systems. You could call it a facility. You could call it a fund. You know, you could call it, it's more the action of being part of it as a member of GGGI and collectively sitting around a table, coming up with ideas for what we call trading norms. Now, that's a sort of slightly made-up word, but it's... Also, you have to do this, 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 and this. But then there's an enormous gap between each rule of, you know, how do you interpret this, that number 1, 2, and 3. But everybody knows that, well, you always use number 3. Or, you know, you always use that law when you do a trade because that's sort of the norm. That's what everyone does. But the seller countries are saying, but we don't know that. We don't have access to that because we're selling once and the buyers are buying 5 times. So we have uneven information. So we want to bring everyone together and go, okay, what's developing and what's happening? Right, might be the market norms that are the bits beyond the rules. So absolutely, it's to work after all of the registries and the UNFCCC rules and everything else, because those are written, but it doesn't mean automatically a trade happens. So it's, now we do a trade, but instead of doing one in isolation, we're trying to do one and then a lot and share and bring everyone together. Yeah? Clarified a bit. Really should change the name, shouldn't we? Oops. Okay. I think I'll leave it there for the next presenter, shall I? Thank you very much.
We would like to thank Ms. Fennell from Global Green Growth Institute for her presentation. Now we would like to welcome Dr. Naoki Matuso from the Institute of Global Environment Strategies in Japan.
Okay, it works. Okay, thank you so much. My name is Naoki Matsuo, and I'm from the IGS, the Institute for Global Environment Strategies in Japan. Okay. So, today I'd like to focus on the other types of the MRV. MRV implies monitoring, reporting, and verification. It's a kind of quantification of the emissions or emission reductions. Okay? So the way that what she presented was on the Article 6. But I'm going to talk on the Article 13. That is a transparency framework or enhanced transparency framework. Okay? Okay, this is the history. I myself has been in this field for about 30 years. So I'm a storyteller in that sense. Okay. So in the beginning, you may have read some history text that the UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention, it entered into force in 1994, and the COP1 was held in 1995. Okay? And you know that UNFCCC is somewhat similar to the Paris Agreement in the sense that each developed country, at that time developed country, is to pledge their targets by themselves and report what they have done so far. Okay, and we have the somewhat elaborated version of the UNFCCC, that is the Kyoto Protocol. But Kyoto Protocol targets only developed countries, and the legally binding targets are specified in the protocol itself. And you may know that the CDM and other market mechanisms was introduced in the umbrella of the Kyoto Protocol. And the EU ETS and some other regional or country-wise emission trading has been introduced as such. Okay, so after that, the Kyoto Protocol, the first commitment period, that is to target 2008 to 2012, 5 years, first commitment period. And the EU tried to extend or expand that kind of legally binding system to other countries, like developing countries. But it was too early to do that. So at the Copenhagen, that kind of trial failed. Okay? So the legally binding target related somewhat of enforcement driven treaty failed to be introduced, targeting whole of the world. So after that, we have the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement, whole of the world, and it does not distinguish developed and developing countries. Okay? And also they set the temperature rise goal as well. But in any case, that each country are required to submit its NDC. It's a kind of target. That's a voluntary target, but you can decide whatever you want. Each country decide whatever you want, but you are required to submit it. And it's a nationally determined contribution. Okay, nationally determined. That is very important. But submitting its NDC, that is not good enough. So we have to trace, we have to track the progress of the NDC. NDC is a target. NDC is a target, but the only target does not mean anything. So the implementation of the actions to meet that target, that is essential. That is essential. How to do that? That's another question. Okay, this is the kind of picture I can show you that in the Paris Agreement framework, that is shown in your left-hand side. And probably you may know that word global stocktake. That kind of discussion will be done at the next COP. But actually it's a global stocktake. Global stocktake implies that that is to realize, share the current status as well as the future scenario that we are going to go. But this is a domestic arrangement. The domestic arrangement implies that each country, every country in the world, are to set some NDC target. That's a nationally determined target. And also, we are to plan some policy and measures, some planning, as well as the policy and measures that are to be introduced in order to meet that NDC target. And also, each country check the progress. Okay? So, and that are to be internationally linked to the international system. So each country, the global stock take, that is a global thing, but so every 5 years, we have to check, we have to share what the status of our global emissions. But each country's status, that are to be checked every 2 years. So each country shall report of its status of the implementation. So that is called transparency framework or enhanced transparency framework. So it means that as a country basis, it has, the Paris Agreement has a system to check the progress every 2 years. At the global level, it has a 5 years interval regular process to check. So it's a kind of PDCA cycle, plan, do, check, and act. Okay? And such a reporting is an essential part. So we discussed that how to raise the ambitions of the NDC many times. But the NDC is just a target. So whether we will be able to meet that kind of a target, that is a very essential point. So basically every country shall submit the biennial transparency report. So you may know that the first biennial transparency report shall be submitted by the end of 2024. So you are required to prepare such a biennial transparency report in around 2 years. Okay? And I'd like to stress, if this transparency framework, ETF process, won't work, then it may mean that such a Paris Agreement framework does not work. So it's a very essential element of the Paris Agreement framework. Okay? Even if the NDC target is a voluntary basis, and also the target itself can be you can freely determine it, but even so, you are required to report it, and you are required to implement some measures to meet it. Okay? So, this is the modalities and procedures and the transparency framework. That is the exact text, and we can have this kind of system in some sense, but in any case, I'll skip it. So this is what each country are required to submit. One part of that is the mitigation policy and the measures, actions, plans. So you are to provide that kind of list of the policy and the measures with its name. So that you may have a lot of such a policy measures, of course. Name, description, objective, type of instrument, status, sectors affected, gases affected, and the implementing entity or entities, and estimate of the greenhouse gas emission reduction that is achieved and expected. Okay? So those kind of information are to be collected by yourself, by each country, and those lists of such kind of information are to be provided in your biennial transparency report. Okay, that is a shall requirement. It is impossible to read it, but actually this is from the Japan's biennial report that has been provided by Japanese government. And it includes several 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 policy measures. And those kind of course, Japan's BTR, biannual report at this moment, includes much more. Please do not take it. I'm sorry to say that it is very small and you cannot read it at all. I understand it. But for this kind of process is very, very important. And this is just a table. It means that under this table, we have a lot of relevant information. Okay? I pick up two policy measures, two actions from Japanese actions. So one is, for example, introduction of cogeneration. Another one is the introduction of high efficiency lighting. Okay? And for each such kind of actions, Japan has this kind of, this is just an explanation, but the graph. It's a monitored value. So the target for this one, target is the blue one, but the historical trajectory is somewhat so it's on track in some sense. But for that one, the target is set as a blue one, but trajectory is not so good. So the kind of annual check of each action, that is very, very important. So actually, for Japanese government is preparing that kind of report every year, not every 2 years, but every year. That is around 2 centimeters thick. So that kind of practice is important for every country to track the progress of their actions. Okay, this is the timetable for the BTR1, the biennial transparency report. The first BTR are to be submitted by the end of 2024. So that is by every country in the world. And technical expert review will continue, or something like that. So reviewing process will continue. And then I myself has been the reviewer of the UNFCCC's transparency framework from the very beginning. That was 1995, long time ago. But in any case, such an BTR process, reporting process, that a biennial process, that is not ad hoc basis. So you shall have that system to report every 2 years, not just one time, every 2 years. That's the kind of system of such a monitoring of something like that. And it includes the inventory. So the inventory preparation, the inventory, the emissions, but the actions, the emission reduction. So there are two types of the MRV. One is the emissions, one is the emission reduction. Those two MRV are different. But in any case, you have only 2 years. Okay? So that is very challenging. I understand, very challenging. But without that, if assuming that, for example, half of the countries in the world did not submit that kind of report, then I must say that the Paris Agreement framework is not working well. So this is the shallow requirement, as I said. I hope you, all of you, including Japan, of course, to start preparation of this DTR as fast as early as possible. Okay, so the ETF process, Enhanced Transparency Framework process, that is the basis, okay, of the Paris Agreement as a truly effective treaty toward the temperature goal. And as for the Qatar, I'm very happy to have some chance to talk here at the Qatar pavilion. So, and the Qatar, I'm sorry to say, the Qatar released the first national communication. Nowadays, national communication are required to submit every 4 years. So in any case, the first national communication was released in around 10 years ago. And for the biennial update report, that is required under the convention, but I'm sorry to say no report has been submitted by Qatar. So that's in some sense. Okay, so nowadays the current requirement, the BUR are to biennial update report are to be required to be submitted every 2 years, and the national communication NC that is required to submit every 4 years, and the national communication submission and the BUR are to be updated to the BTR by transparency report under the Paris Agreement. But in any case, so Qatar has a good capacity on to do that. I believe you have. Of course, the Qatar hosted COP18. I visited there. It was good. And also, okay, after this COP, we'll have the FIFA World Cup. Okay? I myself got 3 tickets. I will visit. I'm very much excited about that. I found a very good mock-up there. And, but in any case, so I'd like to stress that the Qatar has a good resource, and also the Qatar has a good capacity to do that, good enough capacity. So I believe that Qatar will be able to submit this first BTR by the end of 2024. But in order to do so, I'd like to suggest something. As far as I remember, as I know, that the GGGI or some others are now supporting the Qatar Minister of the Environment and Climate Change to prepare such an BTR or to build the system of the MRV. But in any case, I'd like to say that the political will, that is very much important. Political will for NDC implementation and its tracking, that is very important. And Paris Agreement, as well as the former similar type of the action, that is called NAMA, Nationally Appropriate Mitigation Action. NAMA is nationally determined. And NDC is nationally determined contribution. It means not only Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change, but also the government as a whole decided, determined that kind of NDC. It's a kind of commitment by the government, Qatar as a whole. Okay? So, in terms was arranged for arrangement for the NDC implementation and tracking the progress. There is a nationally determined one, but actually that kind of political will, that is very, without that, I'm sorry to say that it will not work. And with a strong plan for actions to meet this NDC target. The Qatar released its latest NDC in August of the last year, I think. So you may need some specific sector-specific actions with target and timetable. I'm sorry to say that I've not studied it well, but you may have some, but that are to be strengthened or revised probably every, for example, 3 years or 5 years or something like that. And as I said, as in the case of Japan, I would like each country, including Qatar, of course, to have some domestic cycle process. So we have to check whether the status of each action and whether it's on track or off track, then it should be strengthened or revised, something like that. So such a domestic PDCA process, that is very important. I hope each country is to build such kind of system. And MRV system, that's a reporting system. And the MRV system development, that is for the greenhouse gas inventory, as well as the mitigation actions. So those two are different. Action and inventories are different. So you may need two types of MRV systems. And in many cases, in many developing countries, I'm sorry to say, those kind of GHG, for example, inventory, are prepared as an ad hoc basis. So targeting only 1 year or something like that. But as I said, that every 2 years required to submit it. It means that you need a permanent or sustainable system. And I'd like to say that PDCA cycle is needed, as I said. The PDCA cycle requires quantified numbers to check whether it is on track or not. The system itself means that the MRV system can be integrated to that kind of PDCA cycle of the actions. Okay? Those are not independent. Those are to be integrated to one. And capacity strengthening, that is important, of course. I understand that in the case of Qatar, the oil and the gas sectors has a very good capacity as well as the resources. Therefore, I think that the oil and gas sectors are to support the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change to prepare that kind of inventory system as well as the action-related MRV system as well. And of course, I think that each country can access CBIT program under the GEF. Sorry, GEF, GEF, I'm sorry to say. The capacity building program for the, that can be utilized. So in any case, we have the deadline for the first BTR, that is by the end of 2024. So please start as early as possible, and such a collaboration between ministries as well as, for example, oil and gas sectors, private sectors, very essential to do that. So that is each country's responsibility, each country's role to do that. So I hope you remind this kind of things. That is a requirement under the Paris Agreement, and try to pursue this kind of issues. Thank you so much.
Any question for Dr. Naoki?
Hello. Yeah, thank you very much for the brilliant presentation, concise and explicit. But I'm a little worried. I'm Chlorine Mokum from the Ministry of Environment, Protection of Nature and Sustainable Development for Cameroon. I begin to question, is the Paris Agreement not biased? How would developing countries develop their BTR in 2 years, considering their level of resources, their level of technology, putting them at the same position with countries like Japan? Let's say we have had enough time to develop the first BTR. Within the next 2 years, are these developing countries, would they be able to second BTR, considering their, and the follow-up question is, what are countries like Japan, who is so developed, doing to see that countries that are underdeveloped or developing meet up with this engagement of the Paris Agreement? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I agree that for developing countries, the prepared is very, very challenging. I understand it. And I myself is doing a lot of these such capacity building programs, and I myself is supporting Laos to prepare that kind of system. But in any case, I'd like to say that you can access to the GEF, Global Environmental Facility, to get some support. That is the program name is CBIT, C-B-I-T. So CBIT's role is to support developing countries to prepare such a BTR, national communication, and build some MRV system in the government. So please make access to GEF, G-E-F. And at that time, you can design or you can ask the suitable program that is for your country. So each country's situation is different. So your country's situation are to be considered in that sense. So you are to access to CBIT program people and discuss what you can receive, what kind of support you can receive. Or you can access, for example, to JICA Japan, and then I myself is happy to support you in that sense. Okay?
Dr. Naoki, as MRV, specifically the verification part. Does Japan have a verification system that is established within your own country, or do you follow ISO 14064 for the verification? And how certainty in the data across the entire sectors? You know, there are aging facilities, there's new facilities, there's different metering, there's calculations, there's so many. So how do you manage the overall within Japan's MRV?
Yes, very good question. Okay, there are two types of the MRV system, and one is the inventory, greenhouse gas inventory. And the greenhouse gas inventory, the IPCC prepared the very good guideline, and it includes how to deal with such an uncertainties. So our Japanese government greenhouse gas inventory office is to follow that kind of guidelines. So that's fine in that sense. But as for the greenhouse gas, as for the action related to MRV, that is somewhat different. And actually I would like to say that for actions, the concrete numbers, for example, 10,000 tons of CO2 equivalent reductions, that number is not so important. If it's, for example, 10% larger than that, it does not it is not so important. So I don't think that we need that kind of precise uncertainty management system treatment for that. But even so, monitoring of the action is very important. So we have to monitor the key performance indicators of each actions and feedback. We have the feedback process to adjust or modify what we have done so far. So that's more important. Thank you.
We would like to thank Dr. Naoki Matuso from the Institute of Global Environmental Strategies from Japan for his presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We would like to welcome Ms. Ainora Kofibia from the Director of Department of Climate Change Policy and Green Technologies.
Good afternoon. my presentation about emission trading system in Kazakhstan and the MRV system of the Republic of Kazakhstan. On this slide, you can see our target to reducing our greenhouse gas emission by 50% of the level 1990, and the conditional goal to reduce greenhouse gas emission by 2050 of the 1990 level. Kazakhstan was create our greenhouse gas emission trading system in 2030, and I am also participant to written special chapter in our law and develop our emission trading system. We have allocation plan of GHG emission quotas and market mechanism for GHG emission reduction and absorption, carbon unit trading, monitoring, reporting and verification system, administrative regulation. In this slide, you can see how our GHG emission trading system was developed since 2013, and now we have our last allocation plan from 2022 to 2025. Before this, we don't have any gaps to reduce on our emissions for each installation, but since 2002 we have a special chapter and regulation from 2002 each year to decrease 1.5% quotas for each year. It's a new chapter in our environmental code for achieving our goal to decrease our emissions by 2030 by 50%. And if it's short to speak about our future plan, we have several projects with TAEX project, PMI project, and EBRD. We try to develop our ETS system. For example, we have a plan to connect our ETS system with other international systems like European Union, and we have a special project with World Bank to implement these our plans in the next from 2030. We have our project will be to 2026 and covered several questions and plans for develop our system. For example, we try to rise in carbon pricing, and also we try to rise in and will be stronger to our MRV system, for example, which also will be the same with standard European Union. And also we would like to, just a second, we would like to also develop our benchmarks, and that's all. Gross governance. Just a moment. And the Mercy system. And yes, and next. You can see, yes, and it's in this slide about our future plans to develop our benchmarking. And I just say that right now we have draft our carbon neutrality strategy, and also we have approved to update our national determined contribution of the country, and develop and the approval of the roadmap for the implementation of the NDC and the strategy. Thank you.
Any questions for our presenter? Okay. We would like to thank you. Obey?
Thank you very much for the interesting presentation. You mentioned the MRV and ETS projects and the many outcomes of the project. So MRV, what method did you use to collect the data? Did you have a database to collect the data from different sectors in the company?
Yes,
and the country?
We have in our country inventory report, and after we have a national communication report and annual report. And this year we ended our 8th national communication report and 5th annual report. And our ETS system covered 43% all emission in our country. And so MRV system, we have a special report from our entities which each year send for us report about GHG emission and have a gaps to reporting which kind of responsibilities they can do. And so we have a plan, will be a strong MRV system in our country because it's, we have some problems sometimes with verification system because it's some of the report has a big problem with checking and data inside report. And so our national emission trading system also needs to will be strong MRV system because we are also try to connect with other linking with other emission trading system, and so we try to develop our systems. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Thank you for your fantastic presentation. Just wondering about the effectiveness of MRV system adoption in reality. Is that it is effective, or it is some challenge that faced the adoption of this MRV system? Thank you.
Is it correct to understand you took your question about adoption of our MRV system? Yeah. I'm sorry?
Adoption and the effectiveness and challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I don't correct understand you, but I try to.
About the implement adoption, effectiveness, and the challenge you face for the adoption of this MRV system in your country. Yeah.
How?
Yeah.
Yes, I think our MRV system also help for us to regulation about 50% our emission big installation which covered by emission trading system. And if we talk about our inventarization, we also compare our report from installation which covered from ETS system and also from our national statistics, and we compare these two reports, and this help for us to be find more mistakes if they have. And I think it will be help for us be more transparency, because it's covered in both of systems. It's national inventory and also on the ETS system also reporting.
Any other questions for Ms. Ainura? We would like to thank Ms. Ainura, Director of the Department of Climate Policy and Green Technologies. Thank you so much for your presentation. And we attendees, thank you for visiting the Qatar Pavilion, and we hope you benefited from our speakers today. Thank you so much.